I was standing in my cousin Rachel's backyard, holding a red Solo cup filled with warm beer, when my Aunt Linda walked up to me with that T-shirt. The family reunion was in full swing around us, kids running through sprinklers, uncles arguing about football, the smell of charcoal and burnt hamburgers hanging in the July heat. She handed me the shirt with this big smile on her face, like she was giving me a present. Biggest disappointment was printed across the front in bold black letters, and she said it would be funny since I was the only one in the family without kids, without a real career, without anything to show for my 32 years. Everyone laughed when I put it on, but I could see something else in their eyes, this cold satisfaction, like they'd been waiting years to finally say what they really thought about me. That's when I realized this wasn't just some stupid joke. My name is Cassandra Winters, but everyone calls me Cass. 3 months before that reunion, I was working my third shift at Henderson Manufacturing, running quality control on the assembly line. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead while I checked each transmission part that rolled past my station. My supervisor, Martinez, would nod when I caught defects others missed. I had been there for 6 years, working nights so I could take care of my mother during the day. At home, our small duplex on Maple Street felt different in the early morning quiet. Mom would be sleeping in her hospital bed that we had moved into the living room after her stroke. I would sit at the kitchen table with my coffee, looking through the medical bills that kept piling up. The insurance covered some things, but not everything. Physical therapy, medications, the home health aide who came twice a week, it all added up faster than my paychecks could handle. I used to be the smart one in the family. Before Mom got sick, I had been saving money to go back to school and finish my engineering degree. I had completed 3 years at State before I dropped out to help with her care. My transcript was still good. My professors had said I could come back anytime. But that was 4 years ago now, and the money I had saved was long gone. In the evenings, I would work on small repair jobs for neighbors, fixing lawn mowers, troubleshooting electrical problems, building storage shelves. My dad had taught me these skills before he died when I was 16. Working with my hands felt like keeping a part of him alive. People in the neighborhood knew they could trust me to do things right the first time. If this story hits home, make sure you're subscribed. We tell these for a reason. The problem started at Christmas dinner 2 years ago. I was sitting at the kids' table because there wasn't enough room at the main table. My cousin Derek had just gotten promoted to regional sales manager, and Uncle Paul kept talking about how proud he was. Derek was 28, 4 years younger than me, and had never worked a day in manufacturing. He sold insurance and lived in a condo downtown that his parents helped him buy. I mentioned that I was thinking about going back to school part-time, maybe taking some online classes in mechanical engineering. The table got quiet for a moment, then Aunt Linda laughed. She said it was sweet that I still had dreams, but maybe it was time to be realistic about my situation. She said some people were meant to be caregivers, and there was nothing wrong with that. The way she said it made it sound like a consolation prize. Last Easter was worse. I had to leave early because Mom had fallen and needed help getting back into bed. When I got home, my phone was buzzing with messages in the family group chat. They were sharing pictures from the dinner I had missed, talking about how nice it was to have adult conversations for once. Derek had announced his engagement, and everyone was congratulating him. When I sent a message saying congratulations and sorry I had to leave early, no one responded. 2 weeks later, I found out through Facebook that they were planning a family vacation to the beach house that my grandparents had left to all of us grandchildren. Derek was organizing it, and apparently everyone had been discussing it in a separate group chat that didn't include me. When I asked my mom about it, she got quiet and said maybe it would be too hard for me to get away from work anyway. That's when I realized they had stopped thinking of me as someone who might want normal things like vacations or celebrations. The worst part wasn't that they excluded me. It was that they had convinced themselves they were being thoughtful about it. So there I was at the reunion, wearing that shirt like some kind of badge of shame. People kept taking pictures, asking me to pose with other family members so they could post it on social media. The fabric stuck to my back in the humidity, and every time someone pointed at the words and laughed, something twisted tighter in my chest. I tried to laugh along at first. I went to the cooler and grabbed another beer, made small talk with my cousin Ashley about her new job at the bank. But I could see people whispering, glancing over at me with those pitying looks that made my skin crawl. Derek walked by with his fiancée Emma and said I should keep the shirt as a reminder to stay humble. Emma giggled like he had said something clever. The breaking point came when I was sitting alone at one of the picnic tables, picking at a paper plate of potato salad. My 8-year-old niece Sophia climbed up next to me and asked why everyone was being mean to me. She said her mom had told her that some adults never learned how to take care of themselves, and that was why they ended up disappointing everyone who tried to help them. I looked across the yard and saw Aunt Linda watching us, arms crossed, that same satisfied smile on her face. She had been telling the kids that I was the family cautionary tale. The one who never figured life out. The one who made bad choices and ended up stuck. Something cold settled in my stomach, but my face stayed calm. I told Sophia that sometimes grown-ups say things that don't make sense and that she shouldn't worry about it. But inside, I was making a mental list of every person who had laughed, every person who had taken a picture, every person who thought this was just harmless family fun. They wanted me to be their disappointment. They needed someone to look down on so they could feel better about their own lives. But they had made one mistake. They assumed I would just take it. I drove home that night in silence, the stupid t-shirt balled up on the passenger seat. Mom was asleep when I got there, her breathing steady and peaceful. I sat in the kitchen with all the lights off, replaying every moment of the day. My hands were shaking, not from anger but from something deeper. Humiliation, maybe. Or just the exhaustion of being treated like a child who needed to be managed. I almost threw the shirt in the garbage, but something stopped me. Instead, I hung it in my closet next to my work uniforms. Looking at it made my chest tight, but I wanted to remember exactly how it felt to stand there while my own family laughed at me. Around 3 in the morning, I found myself digging through the box of Dad's old tools in the basement. At the bottom, wrapped in an old towel, was his leather work journal. He had written down every project, every problem he had solved, every technique he had learned in 30 years of mechanical work. His handwriting was careful and precise, like he knew someone might need these notes someday. I opened to a random page and saw his notes about rebuilding a 1967 Mustang engine for a customer who couldn't afford to take it to a real shop. Dad had figured out how to fix a cracked cylinder head using a technique he had invented himself. The customer had been so grateful that he had brought Dad a bottle of whiskey and a handwritten thank you note. Sitting there in the basement, surrounded by tools and memories, I remembered something Dad used to say. He told me that people who underestimate you are giving you the greatest gift possible, the element of surprise. He said the smartest thing you can do is let them keep underestimating you until the moment you prove them wrong. For the first time in months, I smiled. The next morning, I started making phone calls. First to my old professors at State University, then to the financial aid office, then to the registrar. It took 3 days and a lot of paperwork, but I found out that my credits were still valid and I could re-enroll for the fall semester. Night classes were available for working students, and there were grants available for people in my situation. My first plan was simple: go back to school, finish my degree, and show up to next year's reunion as a successful engineer. But as the weeks passed, I realized that wasn't enough. They would just find new ways to diminish it. Derek would say I was too old to be starting over, or Aunt Linda would make comments about how college doesn't teach you real-world skills. I needed something bigger. Something that would make them see me completely differently. The idea came to me while I was helping my neighbor Mr. Rodriguez fix his riding lawnmower. He mentioned that his son Carlos had been laid off from the auto plant and was struggling to find work. Carlos was a good mechanic, but he didn't have formal training or certifications. That got me thinking about all the skilled workers in our neighborhood who were stuck in dead-end jobs because they didn't have the right pieces of paper. I spent 2 months researching, making more calls, filling out applications. I hit dead ends and got rejected more times than I can count. The community development office said my idea was too ambitious. The bank said I didn't have enough collateral. The city planning department said I was missing too many permits. But I kept pushing. I learned the language of business plans and grant applications. I studied successful programs in other cities. I found a lawyer who worked pro bono for community projects and convinced him to help me navigate the paperwork. Slowly, piece by piece, the plan came together. The hardest part was keeping it secret. Every time someone in the family asked what I was up to, I just said I was working extra shifts to pay for Mom's medical bills. They nodded with that same pitying look and changed the subject. The day before this year's family reunion, I was standing in the empty storefront on Main Street, watching workers install the sign above the front door. Winter's Community Workshop, Skilled Trades Training, and Small Business Incubation. The federal grant had come through 6 weeks ago, along with matching funds from the state and 3 local businesses. We would be opening in September with our first class of 20 students. I had spent 8 months building this from nothing. The curriculum included basic mechanical skills, small engine repair, electrical systems, and business development. Students would graduate with industry certifications and the tools to start their own repair businesses. Carlos Rodriguez was going to be our first instructor, and we already had a waiting list of people who wanted to enroll. But that wasn't the best part. The best part was that the program had caught the attention of Henderson Manufacturing. They were looking for ways to develop local skilled workers, and they had offered to provide equipment and guaranteed job placements for our graduates. Martinez had called me personally to say the company wanted to partner with us on curriculum development. I drove to the reunion wearing the same t-shirt from last year. When Aunt Linda saw me, she looked confused and maybe a little disappointed that I was making the joke again. I let her think that for about an hour while I made small talk and helped set up the folding tables. Then Derek started his usual routine about everyone sharing their year's accomplishments. He talked about his new house and his promotion to senior sales associate. Emma showed off her engagement ring and talked about their wedding plans. Uncle Paul announced that he was thinking about retirement. When it was my turn, I stood up slowly and smoothed out the wrinkled t-shirt. I told them about the workshop, about the federal funding, about the partnership with Henderson Manufacturing. I explained how we would be training unemployed workers and helping them start their own businesses. I mentioned that the program was already being studied by other communities as a model for economic development. The yard got very quiet. Derek's mouth was actually hanging open. Aunt Linda had stopped smiling entirely. Then I told them the best part. The program was being featured in the State Economic Development newsletter, and I had been invited to speak at a conference in Chicago about innovative workforce development programs. The governor's office had contacted me about serving on a task force for rural economic development. I looked around at all of their faces, confused, stunned, maybe a little embarrassed. Then I pointed at the t-shirt and said that they were right about one thing. I had been their biggest disappointment. Because apparently they had set their expectations for me so low that building something this important had genuinely surprised them. The next few hours were strange. People kept coming up to me with this awkward mix of congratulations and questions about why I hadn't mentioned the project sooner. Derek seemed genuinely shocked that I had been working on something this big without telling anyone. Emma asked if there might be opportunities for her marketing background, which was funny since she had barely spoken to me in 3 years. Aunt Linda avoided me for the rest of the day. But I saw her talking to other people, and from their body language, I could tell she was trying to find a way to take some credit for my motivation. She probably told them that the family had always known I had potential, and that sometimes tough love was necessary to help people find their way. I didn't care what story she wanted to tell herself. The truth was already out there, spreading through the family network faster than gossip. By the time I left the reunion, 3 people had asked for my phone number so they could tell friends about the program. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in my kitchen on a Saturday morning, going through applications from potential students. Mom was having a good day, reading the newspaper in her bed and commenting on the local news. The medical bills were still there, but the stress felt different now. More manageable. My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Ashley, asking if I would be interested in speaking at her daughter's career day at school. She said the kids should hear from someone who built something important from scratch. That made me smile, because it was the first time anyone in the family had used the word important to describe something I had done. The funny thing was, the revenge part felt less important now than it had 6 months ago. What mattered more was the 20 people who would be starting classes in September, and the businesses they would build, and the problems they would solve in our community. I still have that t-shirt hanging in my closet, right next to my work uniforms and my interview clothes. Sometimes I look at it and remember exactly how it felt to stand in that backyard, surrounded by people who had decided that my life was a cautionary tale. But mostly now it just looks like a piece of fabric with some words on it. The workshop opened 3 months ago, and we're already planning to expand. Carlos finished training our second instructor last week, and we have partnerships forming with 2 other manufacturing companies in the county. The students call me Director Winters, and when I walk through the shop floor, I can hear the sound of people learning new skills, building something better for themselves. I think about Dad sometimes and how he taught me that being underestimated is only a disadvantage if you believe it yourself. The people who tried to make me small did me a favor, really. They showed me exactly how much I was capable of when I stopped waiting for their permission to be important. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving someone wrong about who you are. Sometimes it's proving yourself right about who you were always meant to be.